Imagine standing in a crowded room, voices overlapping, laughter echoing, eyes glancing and averting, smiles fixed like porcelain. You sense it instinctively. Everyone here is performing. Their gestures, their laughter, their kindness, each one rehearsed to perfection, sculpted by invisible pressures. You feel it in the air, the weight of pretense. But beneath the choreography of manners lies something darker, older, more truthful. We live surrounded by masks, yet we rarely dare to ask, what does a face truly reveal? Nietzsche once wrote, "Every profound spirit needs a mask." Even more, around every profound spirit a mask is continually growing. That sentence pierces through time because it's not just philosophy, it's diagnosis. He saw what most of us refuse to see, that human beings by nature are not transparent. We are self-created illusions trying desperately to appear consistent, moral, confident, kind. Yet the truth of the human psyche lies precisely in its contradictions, its suppressed drives, its hidden motives. To read anyone instantly, then, is not about decoding smiles or hand gestures. It's about perceiving the mask and the impulse behind it. Nietzsche's psychology begins with suspicion, the suspicion that every word, every gesture, every act of virtue conceals something unspoken. He believed that behind our most refined values often hides a craving for dominance, admiration, or safety. When someone speaks with humility, Nietzsche asks, is this genuine modesty or a subtle form of pride? When one preaches morality, is it love for virtue or hatred for those who disobey it? To read a person, he'd say, you must look not at what they show, but what they avoid showing. This is the first law of Nietzschean perception. Every person's behavior is a disguise for their will. Look carefully the next time someone flatters you excessively. Their praise may not be about you, it may be about their need to belong. When a person insists they don't care what others think, you'll often find their entire identity built upon that very rebellion. When someone displays kindness, Nietzsche would whisper in your ear, what inner wound is this kindness protecting? He did not teach cynicism, he taught clarity. He asked us to see through the spiritual fog, to perceive the drives rather than the declarations. Because every human being is a battlefield of instincts. Love and envy, creation and destruction, self-sacrifice and self-interest. To understand anyone instantly, you must learn to see the forces behind the face. Nietzsche called these the will to power, not just the hunger for control over others, but the fundamental drive to assert oneself, to shape the world according to one's essence. This will expresses itself in 1,000 disguises. In humility, in rebellion, in piety, in art. The quiet artist seeking beauty may in truth seek immortality. The moralist enforcing purity may secretly crave superiority. The joker mocking seriousness may be shielding himself from the terror of being seen. Reading people, then, is not a trick, it is a moral art. It requires compassion laced with suspicion. Compassion to understand their suffering. Suspicion to see through their lies. And here lies the paradox Nietzsche forces upon us. If every human is wearing a mask, then so are you. To see others clearly, you must first dare to strip away your own illusions, the pleasant stories you tell yourself about who you are, why you act, why you love. Because your perception of others is only as clean as the mirror of your own consciousness. Until you know your own hunger for recognition, your own capacity for self-deception, you will always mistake others' masks for faces. The crowd laughs. You laugh. But beneath it, something in you whispers, who among us is genuine? And in that moment, your vision sharpens. You begin to see not the person before you, but the hidden architecture of their soul. That is where Nietzsche's psychological truth begins. There is a moment when you look at someone, really look, and something clicks. The tone of their laughter changes. Their enthusiasm feels rehearsed. Their calmness seems too deliberate. You sense an undercurrent, like the slow pulse beneath still water. You are no longer hearing their words. You are hearing their will. Nietzsche believed that beneath every emotion, belief, and gesture flows one central force, the will to power. Misunderstood by many as mere domination or cruelty, it is far more intricate. It is the impulse to affirm one's being, to expand one's influence, to transform chaos into form. This drive exists in everyone, even the gentle, the fearful, the saintly. The will to power is the desire not merely to survive but to matter. It hides beneath the most delicate acts, the artist's brushstroke, the lover's devotion, the teacher's patience. Each is a declaration. I want to shape the world in my image. To read someone, Nietzsche would say, you must ask not what are they doing, but what are they trying to increase? Is it admiration, security, freedom, dependence? Their entire psychology revolves around that pursuit. The shy person who avoids attention may in truth seek control by withholding, forcing others to chase their approval. The loud leader commanding a room might be compensating for an inner sense of impotence. The martyr sacrificing everything for others may secretly crave to rule them through guilt. The mask may change, but the law remains. Every act, every virtue, every silence serves a will. And yet, the will to power is not evil, it is creative. It builds civilizations, art, love, and discovery. But when misunderstood, it becomes manipulation, repression, or despair. When Nietzsche looked at humanity, he did not see angels or demons. He saw energies in conflict. The powerful are not simply those who dominate, but those who have integrated their drives, who can transmute instinct into creation rather than denial. This is where reading people transforms from judgment to insight. Once you perceive the will behind their behavior, you no longer react, you understand. The angry friend is not your enemy. He is a person whose sense of influence has been threatened. The boastful colleague does not hate you. He fears invisibility. The critic mocking others often suffers from the terror of insignificance. By tracing these impulses, you begin to read human nature like a text, layer by layer, contradiction by contradiction. Every word someone speaks is a clue. Every hesitation, every overreaction, every sudden charm, all reveal the same question. Where does their power lie, and where have they lost it? And what of yourself? Nietzsche demands that you apply the same scrutiny inward. When you crave validation, is it love you seek, or confirmation that you still matter? When you preach truth, is it justice you defend, or your ego's throne? The courage to face this truth is rare. Most people build entire lives avoiding it. They surround themselves with moral language, political slogans, romantic ideals, all to disguise the uncomfortable truth that they are driven by invisible hungers. Nietzsche's brilliance was not in condemning this, but in illuminating it. He once said, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." The chaos he spoke of is precisely these competing drives, this inner storm of will and fear. To understand others, you must first respect the storm, theirs and your own. So, when you meet someone new, listen not to their story but to the rhythm beneath it. Does their energy expand or contract? Do they build or do they destroy? Do they use words to connect or to conquer? The way a person directs their will to power reveals the map of their soul. And when you begin to see that map clearly, something extraordinary happens. People cease to confuse you. Their contradictions make sense. Their moods, their pretenses, even their kindness, all become expressions of one living equation. The hunger to matter, to shape, to endure. You start seeing not lies, but layers. The world no longer feels chaotic, it becomes legible. You have entered Nietzsche's psychological laboratory, where every human interaction becomes a case study in power, desire, and creation. Words are the most polished form of deceit humanity has ever created. They shimmer with conviction, they soothe with reason, but in Nietzsche's eyes, words rarely express what we feel. They defend what we fear to admit. When a person speaks, they offer you not truth but architecture, a carefully built temple designed to shelter their motives. The words are stone, the tone is paint, and the silence between them is the echo of what they're hiding. Nietzsche understood this better than any psychologist who followed. To him, language was the battlefield where instincts wage war under moral flags. He asked us to listen not for what people say, but for the will behind what they need to say. Consider how often people wrap their desires in virtue. The ambitious claim they just want to make a difference. The envious insist they only want fairness. The bitter proclaim, I only tell it like it is. Each moral phrase hides an instinct, camouflaged in words society approves of. Nietzsche called this moral self-deception herd language, a vocabulary designed to mask weakness as virtue and resentment as justice. If you wish to read anyone instantly, pay attention to how they speak about morality, success, and suffering. When someone says, I hate arrogance, ask yourself, have they been humiliated before? When they declare, I just want peace, are they truly serene or afraid of confrontation? When someone moralizes endlessly, do they serve virtue, or are they using virtue as a weapon? Nietzsche taught that resentment, ressentiment, is the most common language of the powerless. It is the moral perfume sprayed over envy and impotence. You'll recognize it when someone disguises their inability to act as moral superiority, when bitterness dresses up as righteousness. He did not mean this cynically. He meant it as revelation. For him, language is the X-ray of the soul, transparent to those who listen without illusion. Imagine sitting across from a friend. They say, I don't care about status, but you watch their eyes linger when others are praised. They smile politely, but their shoulders tighten. That single microsecond of tension tells you everything. The words are denial. The body reveals truth. Nietzsche would nod. The body never lies. This is why his psychology feels both brutal and compassionate. He exposes hypocrisy not to mock it, but to remind us how fragile honesty is. People speak in disguises because they cannot yet face their inner conflict. He once wrote, we are unknown to ourselves, we men of knowledge, and with good reason. We have never sought ourselves. That line isn't condemnation. It's an invitation. If you wish to read people, begin with humility. Understand that language is a mirror that distorts as much as it reflects. The clearer your own motives become, the more you will perceive the distortions in others. To decode someone's speech, look for the following patterns. Nietzsche hinted at a contradiction between tone and content. A person laughs while speaking of pain. They are revealing shame. A overemphasis. The louder the moral declaration, the deeper the inner conflict. Evasion. When someone changes subjects too quickly, it's not random, it's defense. A virtue inflation. The need to appear good often betrays guilt or fear of judgment. Watch conversations like a philosopher, not a detective. Each phrase is not an argument, it is a confession. And remember, the greatest disguise is often sincerity. People truly believe their stories. Their words are not lies but self-preservation. Nietzsche called this the tragedy of consciousness, our need to invent noble reasons for animal impulses. The irony is that once you learn to hear the instincts behind speech, you stop being manipulated. The world's noise becomes transparent. You begin to sense who is speaking from creation and who is speaking from fear. Language, in Nietzsche's world, is both symptom and signal. It reveals the sickness of repression and the spark of authenticity. Those who master this perception move through life differently. Calmer, sharper, unshakable. They are no longer enchanted by words, because they see through them into the pulse of power that beats beneath. And it is here, in the silence after words fall away, that Nietzsche's psychology becomes an art of vision. You no longer listen to speech, you listen to soul. There's a certain silence that follows real strength. It doesn't demand to be seen. It doesn't shout or moralize. It simply is. You feel it when someone enters the room, not in their voice, but in the gravity of their presence. Nietzsche would have said, "This is the scent of authenticity, the fragrance of a soul that has stopped lying to itself." He believed that the most profound way to read a person was not by their charm, virtue, or intellect, but by how they relate to suffering. To him, suffering was the crucible of truth, the fire that reveals what kind of metal the soul is made of. Weak people flee from suffering. Strong people transmute it, and in that transformation lies the key to who they are. Watch closely the next time someone experiences pain or failure. Do they grow bitter, seeking blame and pity? Or do they turn inward, quiet, reconstructing meaning from the ashes. The difference between resentment and rebirth is the difference between masks and authenticity. Nietzsche saw this pattern everywhere. The resentful disguise their wounds with accusation. The powerful refine their wounds into wisdom. When he wrote, "What does not kill me makes me stronger," he wasn't offering a motivational slogan. He was describing a law of spiritual evolution. To read anyone, then, is to study their dance with pain. Some people wear their suffering as a crown. They become martyrs, demanding recognition for endurance. Nietzsche distrusted such displays. He saw them as moral theater, pain turned into vanity. The authentic soul, however, suffers quietly, turns the chaos inward, and forges new strength from it. You can feel it in their restraint, their lack of bitterness, their refusal to play victim. These are Nietzsche's higher types, those who do not deny their instincts but transform them into creation. They do not seek validation through morality or pity, but through the art of becoming. When you meet such a person, you know it. Their calm unnerves you, not because it's cold, but because it is earned. To Nietzsche, authenticity was not about being nice or honest. It was the courage to face one's inner contradictions and sculpt meaning from them. He compared this process to the artist shaping marble. The self is the sculpture and suffering the chisel. In contrast, the inauthentic person resists this shaping. They hide from pain, blame others, or cling to ideologies that explain their misery. These are the people who seek comfort in conformity, the herd as Nietzsche called them, preferring belonging to becoming. To read authenticity in someone, look for their relationship with solitude. Do they need constant validation, or can they endure the silence of their own mind? The person who cannot be alone cannot yet be free. They are still addicted to the mirror of others. Nietzsche's authentic man or woman walks differently, not with arrogance, but with inwardness. They don't seek control because they are in control of themselves. Their will to power has turned inward, mastering impulses instead of projecting them. When you encounter someone like this, you recognize the absence of pretense. Their speech is simple, direct, often unsettling. They no longer need to appear good, because they have discovered something greater than goodness, truthfulness. And paradoxically, the more they embrace their flaws and contradictions, the more whole they become. Nietzsche's psychology reverses moral convention. To him, wholeness matters more than purity. The integrated person, who has faced darkness without denial, radiates an aura of groundedness that words cannot imitate. So if you wish to read anyone, ask not what values they preach, but what they have endured and how they've emerged from it. When a person can look back on their suffering without resentment, when they no longer use it as a weapon or excuse, that's the mark of real power. Because the deepest truth Nietzsche revealed is this: authenticity is not found in perfection, but in transformation. The ones who have burned and risen from their own ashes no longer need to hide behind masks. They have become what Nietzsche called the Übermensch in spirit. Not a superhuman, but a self-overcomer, a being who turns pain into art, chaos into order, and weakness into creation. And once you've seen such a person, you can never mistake imitation for the real thing again. Their silence will speak louder than any sermon. Imagine for a moment that you could see everyone without their masks. Not stripped of clothing or titles, but of illusions. No polite lies, no moral camouflage, no borrowed opinions. Just the raw pulse of their instincts, their hunger, their fear, their longing to matter. Would you still want to see them? Because to see people as they truly are is not comforting. It's devastating. And that is why most of the world looks away. Nietzsche knew this danger. His psychology was not a game of manipulation or seduction. It was a spiritual ordeal. He understood that to read others is to walk through a hall of mirrors, and that in every reflection, you are confronted by fragments of yourself. He wrote, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you." That is not a warning against darkness. It's a recognition that perception has a cost. To read another human being accurately, you must have endured your own abyss. You must have confronted your own envy, your own cowardice, your own hunger for control. Otherwise, what you see in others will always be a projection of what you refuse to see in yourself. True psychological vision demands moral danger. It requires the courage to stand in the fire of self-honesty. Once you have done that, however, something miraculous happens. People become transparent, not in a cynical way, but in a profoundly compassionate one. You begin to see that even cruelty, vanity, or deceit are not evil but misunderstood expressions of the same will that lives in you. The will to affirm, to protect, to endure. You stop labeling people as good or bad. You start reading them as living philosophies, each driven by their own equation of fear and power, love and pride. The man boasting at the bar is not despicable. He is terrified of being unseen. The gossip spreading rumors is not malicious. She is starved for significance. The moralist condemning others is not holy. He is terrified of his own shadow. Once you grasp this, judgment dissolves into understanding. Nietzsche's ultimate psychological truth was never about superiority. It was about vision. To see clearly without flinching. To recognize in others the same will that shapes your own life. To realize that the human being is not a riddle to solve, but a force to witness. Reading people, then, becomes less about control and more about liberation. You no longer fall for pretenses because you no longer need your own. You see through manipulation because your ego is no longer seduced by it. You sense authenticity like a change in temperature. It resonates, it stabilizes, it speaks directly to the pulse of your instincts. And this vision changes everything. You begin to speak less and observe more. You watch tone before words, reaction before reason, silence before confession. You recognize how every movement in others is mirrored within you. You become, in Nietzsche's sense, a psychologist of the future. Someone who reads humanity not through morality but through vitality. That's the paradox of Nietzsche's truth. To read others, you must stop trying to read into them and start reading through them. Past their social armor, past your judgments, into the raw fabric of will, fear, and desire. Because every person you meet is a mirror. Every relationship is an experiment. Every conflict, a lesson in hidden hunger. To see the world this way is not cold, it's awakening. You no longer wander blind in the masquerade. You see how the masks move, how the words hide wounds, how power flows invisibly between glances. And slowly you realize the greatest act of perception is love. Not sentimental love, but the kind that sees. To love someone truly is to see the forces that shape them and not turn away. It is to witness their contradictions, their fears, their ambitions, and to understand that behind all of it lies the same trembling will to exist that pulses in you. This is Nietzsche's final revelation for the art of reading people. Understanding others is inseparable from understanding yourself. You cannot see depth in another until you have walked through your own depths. You cannot interpret another's will until you have faced the chaos of your own. In the end, there are no secrets, only blindness. The moment you dare to look without illusion, every mask falls. The world becomes terrifyingly clear and profoundly human. And in that clarity, you realize, to read anyone instantly is not to see through them, but to see with them. To meet the raw truth of the human spirit and recognize it as your own. Only then can you say you have truly seen. Only then does perception become wisdom. Only then does the soul stand naked, unashamed, and utterly alive.